So, good afternoon. I'm Ruud van Hilten. That sounds really Dutch, and I am Dutch. I've tried to do this presentation in German, but I think I'll end up sounding like Louis van Gaal. Do you remember him? When he said, die Tod oder die Gladiolen, I thought like maybe Dutch people should not try to speak German. So I'll do it in English. I do understand German, so if you have any questions in German, don't feel that you have to speak English to me. I do understand German. So we're talking about surviving what I call the mud run of e-invoicing, and you'll see during the presentation why I call it a mud run. But before I go in, let me ask you a few questions if you're aware of certain things. First question I wanted to ask is, do you understand why governments go through the pain and the trouble and the risk of reforming their VAT taxing? Do we know why that happens? Let me give you a few numbers. Perhaps you don't realize, but by 2030, in Germany, about 25% of all people will be 65 years or older. Means that they look like me. Gray hair, shrinking slowly. With Dutch people you don't see that, but they do shrink like everybody else. That also means that there will be twice as many people of 65 years and older than there are children that are younger than 5. What that means is that your population is shrinking. It's not something that is typical for Germany. Same happens in Holland, in Belgium, in France. But it basically means that the population is aging. And Germany has got one of the oldest populations in the world. Your average, your median age is 48. Which sounds horrible. If you compare it to Nigeria, people are 18. And there's 230 million of them. So, the government needs an enormous amount of money to sustain old age pensions, to sustain all the free services that senior citizens have. And of course, you could say that, so let's raise the income tax, or let's raise VAT, make it higher. Well, that is political suicide. It means that Mr. Merz can go home, basically, because nobody is going to stick with that. That's really important. So, what do you then have? What you have is VAT as collection. You may not know, but in Germany, the amount of unpaid tax is about 20% of the total. So out of every 5 euros, 1 euro is not paid in tax due to fraud, to misclassification, and to administrative mistakes. This is why governments are going through this major paradigm shift to move from what we call post-audit to clearance. The situation where governments want to see invoices before they can go to the buyer. The invoice must be electronic in structured format. It's a development that Germany embarked on last year, in 2025. This year, an invoice can be electronic, and if the buyer receives that, they must accept it. And of course, next year, in 2027, we will move to mandatory issuing of e-invoices. And that comes with France and Belgium and Denmark and Slovakia, Slovenia, Latvia. All these countries are doing the same thing. Now, when I joined into compliance, because I'm a compliance manager, I thought that this was going to be a quiet life, frankly. Because taxes are stable, they don't change. And when I joined, Italy happened and everything changed. It's not my fault, but the coincidence was quite painful. Now, if you look at what businesses did in the past, before clearance regimes happened, so before the governments got really involved, is that they were doing a level of risk management. The question you ask yourself is, how likely is it to go wrong? And if it goes wrong, will I get caught? And if I get caught, how bad is it? That is risk management. And in clearance regimes, you can't do that. If you don't comply, you don't exist. That's literally what governments aim to do. And the government sees it all. They know more about you than you know about you. That sounds horrible, it sounds very big brother, but this is where simply VAT taxation is moving into. Now, if there was any level of harmonization, things would be easy. If countries did more or less the same thing, it would be easy, but they don't. And policy changes in countries are extremely complex and confusing and typically lead to this situation. Does anybody know what this is? I know because I'm old enough, but your guys are all young. So this is the day that Sweden changed the direction of traffic. Sweden used to drive on the left-hand side of the road, and on the 22nd of September 1969, they moved to the right-hand side of the road. They've been preparing for it for 2 years. 2 years. And this is what happened on the day. It's called a Dagen Ha, or H-Day, and literally means that people start driving into different directions. It was pretty messy. 21 people died, and there were not that many cars around that time, right? This is 1969, and it was a terrible mess. This is what policy changes do to economies and businesses. And I'll talk to you a little bit more why that is. Now, what is happening out there is what we call a data revolution. If you need to do your VAT return today, you tell the government how much you sold, how much you owe them, or how much they owe you. Basically, that's what you do once a month in your VAT returns reporting. In clearance regimes, where the government sees every invoice, they will tell you how much money they think you owe them. And that means that if you don't have your data in order, even if you don't agree with the government, you have no line of defense. This doesn't sound very dangerous at the moment, but actually this is what every government in Europe is looking for: pre-filled tax returns. Means that they will tell you how much your tax return will be, because they see every invoice. Or differently, the truth is in the transaction. Also, when a government spots a suspicious invoice, a suspicious transaction, they can immediately do a spot audit. They can literally, from that moment, to say, I'd like to see those invoices, please, and can I see that entire series? Because I don't trust what I'm seeing. They see what you do. Again, I'm not trying to make this very big brother, but this is exactly what's going on. Why? Because every country in Europe has a VAT gap. In every country in Europe, companies don't pay all their VAT. And as I said earlier, in Germany, that is about 20% of the total VAT liability. That's a lot. And total in Europe is 95 billion euros in unpaid tax. Can you imagine for a second what you can do with that money? So that's important. Governments do this for a really good reason. And, of course, many countries are moving in that direction. We just did a little bit of an arrow with the direction of travel, but these are all the countries that are planning CTC, also known as continuous transaction controls, or an e-invoicing mandate in the next few years. This is not even everything. What it doesn't say here is how many changes there are in countries that already implemented a change like this. Every country changes regularly. This entire picture brings the number of countries that do a clearance model where the invoice needs to be electronic, where the government wants to see the invoice, to about 120, 130 in total. And we believe that we are looking at an unstoppable, call it tsunami. This is more or less what it looked like 2 years ago, and this is where we are going. We believe that the only countries, you can't see it very well on those colors, the only countries that probably wouldn't do this are the US and maybe Canada. US because they don't have VAT, and Canada because they're very close to the US. And Canada might actually do it. So we believe that within the next 4 to 5 years, every country globally will have implemented a mandate. Again, a requirement for invoices to be electronic, and a requirement for the government to see the invoice first. Because that's what's going to happen. Germany 2028, the e-reporting requirements have already been announced. You will have a government platform that you need to report your invoices to. That gives them real-time visibility. Every one of these countries is implementing the same thing. And I say the same thing, remember that for a second, because it's not the same thing. Now, where is Europe in all of this? Well, of course, Europe, you may be aware, has accepted a directive earlier this year, after years of discussion. That's called VIDA, VAT in the digital age. It's a directive, meaning legislation. Countries will have to comply with this. And it has three pillars, it has three elements. One is, if I start bottom to top, the first one is the single VAT registration. That is the principle where small businesses, if they do business in multiple European countries, do not need to have a VAT number in every country. Sounds very innocent, it's actually very, very important if you run SAP and you receive invoices that are actually told apart based on the VAT number of the customer, if they have one VAT number in all of Europe. The other one is the platform economy. Companies like Uber, companies like Airbnb, Booking.com, it is just not clear who pays the VAT. Is it the person who rents the room, or is it the person that offers the platform? And that has now been clarified, that who needs to pay the VAT, and actually that it is typically the platform. So it would be Uber or Airbnb who need to pay the VAT unless they say that the local entrepreneur is willing to pay the tax, which of course they'll say. But this is the second part of VIDA. The third part is the part that touches us all. It's called Digital Reporting Requirements, or DRR. And that means that every invoice that goes from one European member state to another European member state, let's say from Germany to the Netherlands or from Germany to Belgium, needs to be reported to the tax authority. It's not a domestic invoice, this is a cross-border invoice. It's an invoice from one country to another. You need to report it to the tax authority, and your tax authority needs to report it to the European Union in what's called the extended VIS, which is a very, very, very big database. Why just cross-border? Because it is impossible for the European Commission to tell individual countries what they need to do with regard to their taxation. So it's only cross-border. Now imagine a situation that you are in a country like the Netherlands that has no plans to move to electronic invoicing. It means that domestic invoices between Dutch companies can be exchanged in paper or PDF, but that cross-border invoice to a customer in Germany needs to be A, electronic, and B, needs to be reported. That's a nightmare. That is why so many European countries at the moment are rushing to implement a local mandate, rushing to implement a local version of an electronic invoicing requirement. VIDA is not going to happen tomorrow. It's actually going to happen over time. As you can see, so we've got a long timeline until 2035, but actually the digital reporting requirements are going to get implemented in 2030. But if you want to do that in a country, just remember what happened in Sweden when they changed the direction of travel. You need to start 2 or 3 years before the actual legislation happens. Because people need time. You need time to adjust, you need time to implement. So it's not like, oh, it's 2030, we can forget about it. No, next year you need to start. Countries need to start. And the Netherlands even is already started. Now the other thing that's happening is that VIDA is already happening today. One of the things that VIDA does says that the buyer, the receiver of the invoice, does not need to agree to receiving electronic invoices anymore. That's why your legislation has happened. That's why the 2025 legislation happened that said if the supplier sends a European norm invoice, which is structured in Zoekvaart or in E-Rechnungsstellung, you have to accept it. That comes from that legislation. So VIDA is already happening today. And I tell you, time flies. I mean, I can still remember I was 25 having a beer in some very nice places, and I blink my eyes and I'm 65 years old and I'm on stage in Germany. So time flies. Now, I said earlier, if everybody did the same thing, it'd be easy. But countries are not doing the same thing. This is what countries have as a choice. They have a choice for a model. How are we going to implement our electronic invoicing model? Do we use an entity in the middle, like a central entity like Italy? with the Sistema de Intercambio have done, or Poland is doing with KSEF, or Romania has done with ANAF. That's a centralized model. The only way to send an invoice to your customer is through that platform. You don't send your invoices directly anymore in these countries. Centralized model. Or are we maybe doing a multi-corner model where the supplier and the buyer each use their own provider and they need to exchange a standard, like France or like Belgium or to an extent Denmark and what Croatia is doing. And actually, if you talk about that, you think, so Belgium and France are doing the same thing then? No. It's a multi-corner model, but the implementation is very different. Belgium is based on PEPL, the pan-European e-procurement platform online, but France is not. France have invented their own thing. And it's very different from what we know. So even two countries that are neighboring, do a lot of business together, share a language, at least the south of the country does, do not implement the same mandate, even though they know that the cross-border trade between the two countries is very, very intense. France goes even further. France also mandates that transactions with consumers must be reported to the government. And that transactions that go outside the country must also be reported. And that you need to tell the government when your invoice was paid. That's a huge change. I'm doing a lot of work in France. And France has delayed their mandate, their implementation, with 2 years. And still, customers are struggling. Companies are struggling because it's horrifically complex. And that's only one country. Now imagine that you need to do 10 of these. How much time do you want as a business to spend on these things? If your core business is something completely different, this is not what you want to do. Actually, where this takes you is my promised mud run. This is what that looks like. It is ugly, it is dirty, it is slippery, and it's full of obstacles. I know people who do these things. Does anybody here do these things? For fun? That's voluntary. Yeah, but just imagine you have to do this. And each of these dirty humps of mud is another regulation that you need to comply with. How long do you think it will take you to get to the other side? So you do not want to do this yourself. Now there's one thing, absolutely one thing, that you need to be able to do. If you bear in mind that governments implement their own models with their own invoice formats, with their own connection methods to the government, with their own archiving requirements and signature requirements, if you remember that, there is one thing that you need to, what you really want to avoid, is that you end up with local implementations for each of these mandates in each country. You will have to manage, I don't know how many partners, and it's incredibly difficult to do, and you will need to deal with I don't know how many different invoice formats coming into your ERP. I tell you that your IT budget for the next 10 years is done. Shot. You will not be able to spend a penny on business development or improving your business or on just basically competing better. So what you need to be able to do is to receive any invoice in any format from any country. Now, I work for Tungsten Automation. I can't stand here with all my colleagues in the room not talking about our business, but this is what we do. Our tools allow customers to send and receive any invoice in any format, in any manner, to the government, through PEPL, through normal e-invoicing, as a signed PDF, as a structured file. We don't care. What we deliver to you is structured and consistent. So we take away their pain. Their pain is probably best looked at in this way, because this is the reality. If you do business in multiple countries, you will end up with 10 different connection types, different APIs, PEPL connections. Oh, and by the way, if you guys think that PEPL is PEPL everywhere, it's not. Unfortunately, PEPL also has its local variations. So this is what you end up with. Is this how you want to spend your business days? Is this how you want to develop your business? I don't think so. What you want is this. One solution to connect you with government portals and one solution that connects you to government portals to actually get the invoice in. This is helpful. Everything else is just a nuisance and will cost you an awful lot of money. Now, I've spoken about compliance a lot because I'm a compliance manager, and I'm a tax geek, and I actually really like taxes, and I know it's not healthy, but I sort of enjoy it. But actually, why do businesses exist? Businesses exist to grow, to compete, to create value for their customers, their shareholders, for their staff. So everybody is on a journey somewhere to compete better. So tax compliance is necessary to exist, but business improvement is necessary to compete. And if you don't compete, you die. It's as simple as that. If you're not competitive, if you don't innovate, if you don't take your business up, you die at some point. Or maybe not die, but you become marginalized. And what I find interesting about these particular events, because I see a lot of these, is that if you visit the booths of the vendors here, the exhibitors, many people tell you, like, we can do zoekvet and we can do E-Rechnungsstellung. And I'm going, is this really what you came here for? I mean, you can read that in the sales brochure. What you came here for is to lead or to learn how you can drive your business better. So yes, you need to comply, absolutely. No life without it. But if you don't improve business, you will die. So this is what we do as a living. We ensure that we marry compliance with efficiency, because we know that compliance alone does not allow you to grow your business. It doesn't help you survive. It helps you to be. It helps you to be there as an entity in a country, absolutely does. But it doesn't improve anything. Let me explain this with an example. Electronic invoicing mandates have existed in Latin America for almost 20 years. We forget that sometimes, but they were way ahead of us. Mostly because nobody paid tax in those countries, so the government needs money. And they started imposing these mandates in Chile first and Brazil very quickly thereafter. 20 years later, companies are still receiving their invoices attached to an email. It's a structured file. It's an XML. How does that help you? So now, customers come to us, businesses come to us and say, what do we do now? We are compliant, we do what the government wants us to do, but we're looking at, well, I think what you would call a mediumbroeg. We're looking at something very painful. Hundreds of thousands of invoices attached to an email. That's not automation at all. It breaks. So that's what we take out in Latin America and globally in any other country. So when I hear governments say that, well, we're trying to help the market digitize, I'm thinking, no, you're not. The only thing you're trying to do is collect tax. And you should. That's what your job is as a government. Digitization is the job of businesses. That's what we do. So I would say come to our booth and talk to us about how we marry these two things. Compliance alone is not enough. Now, I'm nearing the end of it, but I do briefly need to talk about AI. So we, in our house in the Netherlands, we needed a new toilet. Every now and then you need a new toilet. So I went to a store and the guy was trying to sell me a toilet with AI. And I was like, I find that very worrying, very concerning. I mean, AI what exactly? What does it do? Actually, how does it do it? Does it look at me when I go to the bathroom? And that's horrible. Why would I buy a toilet with AI or a toothbrush with AI? Does that mean AI has no value? Because I hear AI everywhere here. I've heard three things here: zoekvet, E-Rechnungsstellung, AI, the whole day. So I think I need to say something about it. So one thing about AI we learned very hard in our company is that AI is absolutely hugely useful. But we are all, at least I am assuming that we're all finance people here, and that we're all quite conservative. We don't like taking risks. So let alone leaving decisions up to a machine that we don't really know what it does. I don't even dare to use it in my toilet, let alone taking decision how I need to do my tax coding. There's one thing I learned really the hard way, is that you cannot layer intelligence, AI, over chaos. If your business is not clean with regards to your data, If your processes are not clean and visible, it is going to be worse. It's not going to help you. But if you do get it right, the efficiencies are enormous. And the efficiencies don't come from machines that take decisions, but the efficiencies come from machines that create insight, that take repetitive work out. Not so much taking decisions about how you need to do GL coding. It recommends GL coding. That's what we do with it. So I believe this is really important to talk about this way. And I always struggle a bit in Germany with artificial intelligence because I think you guys call it KI, künstliche Intelligenz, right? I'm from the Netherlands. KI in the Netherlands means artificial insemination, kunstmatige inseminatie. I always struggle a bit with that. But anyway, KI is really important, or AI is really important, but it needs to be used appropriately, and you need to be, as a business, you need to be ready for it. Again, we have a lot of experience here, and we know that if we deploy it correctly, we can provide you with the financial insights. We can provide you with the machine learning that you need to drive repetitive process out, but only after we made you compliant, and only after we know that your business process is visible and that we have been able to automate it to a certain extent. Otherwise, it simply won't work the way you want it to work. Now, if I haven't scared you enough, let me show you my last slide. What's coming next? As I said, I'm a tax geek. I do a lot of work for the European Commission, and I know that all these things are coming our way. Improved, or let's say, enhanced requirements for KYC, know your customer, is going to happen in every country. You need to know who you do business with, and you need to prove that you did your background checks. I'll just take a few. Reverse charging. There are countries in Europe that want all their invoices reverse charged, meaning that the buyer pays, not the supplier. Another one is data sovereignty and data security. Under pressure of all the conflict and all the, let's say, pressures in the world, we see more and more governments saying that they want to retain data in their own country. All these things are coming. These are all the things that we in Tungsten Automation are busy with on a daily basis. If you don't have questions about these yet, you should. And you should start thinking about them. And if you have these questions, my colleagues are here to talk you through them. That was me done. I want to thank you for listening to this and not running out thinking like, oh my God, how terrible that the guy doesn't speak any German, but it was the Tod oder die Gladiolen, and I just needed to do it this way. So, there may be any questions I'm very happy to answer.
Yes, first of all, big applause for Ruud. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And there is indeed one question that arrived just right now. What do you think is the best mandate for business and government?
Oh, that's a really good one. In 2 weeks' time, there will be a position paper from a trade association called the GINA. GINA stands for Global Exchange Network Association. That's all e-invoicing providers, competitors, collaborating. And we're saying one thing is that we very strongly endorse the multi-corner model. The model where the buyer and the supplier both use a service provider, and the standardization needs to happen between the service providers, not between the buyer and their service provider and the supplier and their service provider. And that has the least impact on existing business processes.
All right, perfect. Quick and easy. Thank you very much. And if you like this presentation, of course, you can vote for Ruud to get maybe the Speaker Award, which we'll be announcing in like a couple of minutes, 30 minutes after this last presentation for today. So once again, thank you very much, Ruud. This is for you. Your applause.